Otherwise on SAFM.
Well, indeed, it is Otherwise coming to you live from the International Development Corporation. As the man says, it's the 7th Women's Leadership Conference, and all good things are worth waiting for. And we've had so much going on here, so lots and lots to think about. And we've got lots of guests lined up. We've not got so much time to talk to them, but what we have heard certainly has been worth listening to. So thanks very much to the hard-working team who've made it happen. Let's not dilly-dally. Let's get straight stuck in here. Because right in front of me I have Debbie Edelstein, who's looking hell of a calm, considering that things have been quite busy. She is the host and she is the co-founder of Quality Life, the organisers of this event. Debbie, lovely to have you with us.
Thank you, Nancy.
And this is the 7th Women's Leadership Conference, and how time does fly, eh? And, you know, my first question really is, it's after 7 years, 7-year itch, how have things changed? I mean, have you noticed a considerable difference in the nature of the conversation? In other words, have women progressed thus far within the 7 years?
I think that the conversation is a lot more diverse. I think there's a lot more vociferous argument, which makes me very excited. There's a lot more agreement, and isn't this wonderful that as women we are all together? Because a lot of women are disagreeing. You know, is there a glass ceiling? Isn't there a glass ceiling? Do women drag each other down, or do we pull each other up? So it's really exciting to hear the tension, because that's what makes for a great conference.
Exactly, and quite a lot of disagreement, which is a very healthy thing. In fact, the glass ceiling has been redubbed the concrete ceiling, but if you can see through it, you can break through it.
Exactly.
One of the speakers who came to us via, video conferencing, well, it was a TED speech, really. It was the CEO of Facebook, Sheryl Sandberg.
Sandberg, yes.
Sandberg. She had some wonderful points to make, and some of the points she made were very controversial. I think a lot of the feminists are not so approving of what she said. Can you pick out some of the salient points that you think really were interesting?
I can indeed. It's a controversial talk, and it has done the rounds on TED and on Facebook for a while, because she emphasizes the individual's contribution in crashing through glass ceilings. And of course, we can't forget about society and organizations' roles as well. So that's very much the tension. But she says essentially 3 things. The first is that sit at the table, what I like to say as speak up. You know, so we need to make sure that our voices count and that we make sure that we're at the boardroom table. The second is, she says, make sure that your partner is a real partner, whether it's a business partner, life partner. Make sure that you're negotiating and sharing power dynamics at home and at work. And often women tend to labor under the superwoman syndrome, and we don't do that. So that's quite important. And then what I really like, her third point is make sure that we don't leave before we leave. And what she means is that when women decide to have a family, sometimes they disinvest emotionally and psychically before they actually leave organizations. And it's hard enough to keep our career track going when we have to leave physically. So we need to make sure that we are there energetically as much as possible till the last possible moment.
Fully present, I think,
Fully
is
present,
the expression.
Absolutely.
The other person who spoke, in fact, who offered that piece was Phuthi Mahanyele. She's CEO of the Shanduka Group, and
Yes.
she had some very, very pertinent things to say. Unfortunately, we can't go through the whole lot, but one of the things she said, 2 things that she said were specifically of interest. She talked about being the CEO of yourself. Just explain, what does she mean by that?
Well, she means that you need to take control and charge of your own career and your own brand. And, you know, the whole notion of branding yourself has become quite a popular one in recent years, so that received a lot of acclaim. And in a subsequent panel, we had a very dynamic conversation around what it means to take charge of that career. You know, we can't really wait for organizations to map out a career path anymore. We need to take responsibility, we need to speak up, we need to make sure that the networks that are available to us, that we're leveraging them, that we're having conversations in the passageways if we're not playing golf. So that was quite an important point.
The other thing that she had to say, which I think resonated for a lot of people, she said, you have to get out of the complacency zone. It's no good saying, well, I'll just go with the flow and see how things happen. You have to have a strategy. And we're going to be talking some more about strategies in just a minute with one of our other guests. But the complacency zone, it meant to you what?
Well, it means to me that, you know, especially in an economy like this where there's a global recession, we've got to continue reinventing ourselves, not just as individuals but as organizations. And I think that the dynamic nature of the digital economy makes it possible to do so. But it's an exciting time, but it's also a challenging time.
Yeah.
You know, we can't afford to be complacent at any stage.
Yeah, exactly. One must challenge oneself. It's no good sort of sitting there and waiting for it all to happen.
Exactly.
Well, it's certainly all happening at the moment, Debbie, and you must be very thrilled because the level of the conversation, the vitality of the conversation is very, very exciting.
There's a buzz.
And people have another thing that I think she said. I think it was Cheryl who said, or somebody said, you've got to keep your hand up. It's no good sort of putting your hand up tentatively and letting it drop down again. You've got to be there and keep your hand up.
Hand up, speak up, make
Still
sure
at
you're
the table.
noticed.
Fabulous. Debbie, thanks very much. Back into the fray there. You're listening to Otherwise here on SAFM, Talking Women in a big way. We're here at the 7th Women's Annual Leadership Conference, in fact, but lots of conversations, in fact. And earlier I was in conversation with a number of women. We were talking about how to take control of your career. One of the women we spoke to was Joanne de Vet. She's Operations Director of McDonald's South Africa. And she's also co-chair of the McDonald's Women's Leadership Network, so she's doing great things for women. And one of the conversations that we had with you, Joanne, lovely, so thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you,
was
Nancy.
the question that comes up inevitably with women. It was the work-home-life balance. And you know, as I said, I think, I'll be having this conversation again. You've got a strategy. Just explain to us what it is.
So for me, I think, as similar to our earlier conversation, for me it was not necessarily when I conceptualize work-life balance, I look at more in the format of work-life harmony. And so what that means to me is making sure that I can give all of myself in the different roles that I play within, whether it's at work, whether I'm the mother or the wife at home. So when I look at harmony within myself, very often, harmony for me would be there's sometimes I spend 70% of the time at work, 30% of the time at home. But for me, it was around the prioritization and making sure that as much time and attention I gave my career, I was also setting the expectations in my family environment and to my husband and to my children that they're clear that they are equally important in my life. And as a result, similar to what Pootie had mentioned earlier around is your partner a true partner, I can be... for me, I'm comfortable to say that in my relationship, my husband is truly a partner to me. And that in itself brings some form of harmony. To expand a little bit on that, I'd say to you that when I look at my children, it's important for them to understand that it's not the quantity of time that I spend with them, but in actual fact, the quality of time. And making sure that for the moments that they need me and the significant events that they want me to attend to prioritize and make sure that I'm present. So that they see that I'm equally passionate about them as my children, similar to my career.
It has to be said that you're also, without adding any more to your pressure, because you already deal with a lot of things, that you've got 4 sons. So you're a role model not just to other women from your community, but also to those boys who are going to see that actually women can work and it can be successful. Is that something you're conscious of without sort of ramming it down their throats?
Yes, I am. And I think women very often think that to be an advocate of women, you necessarily only have to partner with women. I think it's ironic that for me, that's an advocate of women in business, that I've got 4 sons. So when I look at my 4 sons, I find that I can make a contribution to society in the future by sharing with them the value of having a mother that could be a businesswoman and still take care of their needs at the different phases of their lives. And so that in future, any partner that they may get involved in, that they could equally be supportive, similar to the role my husband plays in my life.
Just moving away from your work-life balance strategy, and it has to be said that it is a strategy, you make a point of saying to the boys, okay, listen, if you've got something that's really important, I will be there, and they remind you. And so you're teaching them good work skills themselves. But going back to what else you do at McDonald's, you're also part of the McDonald's Women's Leadership Network. And you referred earlier to something that you called not so much the glass ceiling, but the sticky floor. What is the sticky floor, and what do we do about that?
So just to contextualize the sticky floor, I think there's a lot of conversation around the glass ceiling. And I think it's really through the perceptions or the lenses. For me, it was not necessarily the glass floors, or the glass ceiling, but more around the sticky floors. And the sticky floors was more my framing, the obstacles that held me back. And that whether the glass ceiling exists, and I think an earlier speaker said, is the fact that you can see through there means that you can overcome and circum that. So.
Well, what are the women? What keeps them stuck to the floor? Is it self-stick? Is it is it self-adhesive? In other words, I mean, are they actively not making that move, that challenge?
I found obviously with my working environment and with my experience, I found that it was more about them the limitations that they had set for themselves, whether it was in the format of ambition, whether it was, I can't be a businesswoman and a mother or a wife at the same time. So it's how they framed and contextualized it personally that I saw as the sticky clause.
Just one other thing, and it came up in the panel discussion about taking control of your career. Do you feel that that while you're busy taking control of your own career, looking after your family, do you feel that it's also necessary for you to help other women? I mean, do you see yourself in other women who are coming up and battling?
Yes, I think it's equally important, and hence me being a champion of women through the Women's Leadership Network for McDonald's. In my work environment, I found very often that even though women are the majority in terms of employment within the organization, they weren't as ambitious, and they lacked almost the aspiration. And so for me, being part of that role model is to inspire them that possibilities in terms of driving their own career exists, and that even taking it further, that they could be role models of the societies that they came out of as well.
Lovely, and Joanne, I'm going to leave that with you. But one of the questions that I wanted to ask, and what didn't have time for, was what next? I mean, having achieved all that you've achieved, do you still strategize? Do you still think, okay, this is what I still want to achieve?
I think it's that striving around completion, and I think the thing that feels incomplete is not being able to have, let's call it, pulled up more women along the way. So for me, until that level of completion has taken place, I don't think I'd be comfortable.
Can I feel guilt in that answer?
No, positive discomfort.
Positive discomfort. Just going back to the complacency zone that Debbie was talking about, have you ever felt it doesn't feel like, but have you ever felt that you've been in a complacency zone? Do you ever pull yourself up and say, come on, girl?
Yes. I think that's the reality of business, questioning where you at, what progress you made, am I getting bored? And if I'm getting bored, what are the other things that I can contribute in outside of the department in which I operate? And hence, looking at stuff such as Women's Leadership Network to always reinvent myself and keep myself engaged and energized within the organization, and then obviously to grow at a personal level as well.
Reinvent yourself. It was interesting, I think, also on our panel was Anne Pratt, and she said at the end of every year what she does, she goes and sits for 2 weeks on a beach and rewrites her strategy, her personal strategy, and I thought, what a lesson that was. Joanne de Wet, thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you,
Thanks
Nancy.
a lot. Joanne de Wet, she's Ops Director at McDonald's. And we're coming to you live from the 7th Annual Women's Leadership Conference right here at the IDC in Sandton. Coming back to you with a whole lot more, so do stay with us, but right.
Otherwise on SAFM.
It is indeed Otherwise, coming to you from a very lively IDC. We're talking from the 7th Annual Women's Leadership Conference hosted by Quality Life, and here it is on SAFM, and I must say very exciting. We've had all sorts of things, and there's still so much more to come, which is good. Going to be talking in a minute to Shafinaz Hassim. She's a sociology lecturer at Wits University. She's going to be talking a little bit about violence in the workplace and the social aspects around that. Also going to be talking, very thrilled to be going to be talking to Lebogang Dita. She's one of our winners who won herself a place here on the conference. We're going to be hearing a little bit about her take and how it's been for her. But first up, we have Tali Nates. She is the director of the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Centre, which is being built as we speak, well, more or less as we speak, here in Johannesburg. So, Tali, lovely to have you with us. Okay, Tali, well, firstly, just give me your take on what you've heard so far, or how has it been for you, as I say?
It's very, very exciting to listen to strong women that are reflecting deeply and generous in offering their deepest soul and thoughts to other women. Really thrilling.
It's interesting that you use the word strong women, because our previous speaker, it was Lauren Sieberts, I think, was talking about bossy women, and that, men are never referred to as bossy. It's only women who are referred to as bossy. So maybe let's just go with strong as opposed to bossy. But what I wanted to ask from you is, right now, the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Centre is being built, and I think that one of the things that I'm getting from that, you yourself are a descendant, if you like, of survivors of the Holocaust, and we've heard a lot of women saying a lot of things, all of which reflects back on their own personal history. And I'm just wondering, positively or negatively, to what extent a woman's history, her heritage, her personal upbringing impacts on herself. What's your feeling?
Dealing with people with deep trauma, because I'm talking to Holocaust survivors, Rwanda survivors, people that went through apartheid, through human rights abuses, through genocide throughout. Women many times carry the trauma. They carry the trauma for the family, and then when kids are born, they give that trauma almost with the mother's milk to their kids. I can speak about myself and say that definitely growing up with trauma of the past brings with it certain difficulties and challenges that you have to deal with. And then when you have kids, and I have 2 kids, how do I make sure that the trauma doesn't pass to the 3rd generation or the 4th generation?
Without denying them their heritage
Absolutely.
and what they need to know. For a lot of women, sadly, in this country, they're living with trauma, never mind historical trauma, they're living with immediate trauma, which is very difficult. But I suppose what I'm really asking is it possible to transcend that sort of trauma, whether it's historical trauma or your own trauma, in a positive sense? Is there some way in which one can use it to reflect back and say, okay, I'm going to overcome this? Does it perhaps make women even stronger?
I think so. And Rwanda, for example, is a great example where women are playing a huge role. It is the country where women are playing the most major role. More ministers are women in Rwanda than any other place. So in a way, what do you learn from the abuse? What do you learn from the trauma? You learn that people have choices all the time. That when you come in front of perpetrators, many times men, but sometimes women, you can also choose how to not be a perpetrator in your life, in life in business, in the life in with your own kids. You can choose to become an activist for change. You can become a person that is not going to be a bystander when she sees things that are wrong, and actually actively change society. So I do believe that trauma does strengthen you if you just let it.
Is it something you share with your children? I mean, it's almost sort of second-hand already for you. Is it something that you share with your children actively?
Very much so. My daughter is graduating actually next week, and surprise, she chose to study human rights and international relations, and she's going to work at the Global Center for the Responsibility to Protect. And for me, it's, did you not want to choose something more profitable, maybe be, in business? No, she really wants to save the world, and let her try.
Just lastly, Rwanda, you spent quite a lot of time there. I think there are all sorts of connections between what happened in the genocide and the Holocaust. What lessons have you learned from Rwanda? I mean, how has it been different, and how have they dealt with it?
Rwanda is so important for us South Africans. In April 1994, same month as we went to democracy, they went into genocide, same month. But they, of course, went into such different way. But there is so much to learn from what they do now, how they are dealing with the survivors that have to live with perpetrators right next door, and they have to live together. They have to find a way to communicate, to use resilience, and to build, and to become a society of activists for change rather than for destruction. So there's a lot that we can learn from Rwanda.
There's a lot that we're going to learn from you, I think, because your topic that you're going to be talking about is social problems solved by women who harness the potential of community, conversation, and creativity. I look forward to hearing that too. Charlie Nates, thank you so much for joining us. Charlie is she's the director of the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Centre, and I hope that at some stage down the line we'll be hearing a little bit more about that centre on Otherwise, so do stay tuned. And don't forget, if there's anything you'd like to hear on Otherwise, maybe you've got a story you'd like to share yourself, you're welcome to get in touch with us. We're at otherwise@safm.co.za when we're not busy jetting around the country going to all these interesting conferences. And it's an interesting conference we're at now. It's the 7th Annual Women's Leadership Conference coming to you from the IDC. And I was lucky enough earlier to chair a panel discussion about taking control of your very own career. And a lot of us do, a lot of us don't. It's one of those things that just happened. But just one of my panelists was Shafinaz Hassim. She's a sociology lecturer at Wits University. We've had her on the program a couple of times before because she's written a couple of books, one of them being Daughters Are Diamonds and the other one being Belly and the Fire and the Belly. It's an anthology, Belly of Fire. We've got her sitting right here in front of us. I think we've got her mic'd up. Shafina, it's lovely to have you with us.
Absolutely great to be on
Super,
your show
super.
again, Nancy.
I can see you, one of those people, I can see you absorbing all the things that have been discussed. And I think it was Lauren Siebert's discussion. She was talking about the contribution that women make to the workplace, and I can see that you were absorbing that. What did you take away from that conversation?
I think that the conversation generated throughout, with the delegates was important to take from, especially because I think that women configure their social lives and their corporate business relationships in very similar ways. And so this lends to a level of disempowerment by virtue of that similar configuration. And so what we heard today was women saying, well, I'm not able to voice these or these particular instances where I'm disempowered in the workplace because it might lend to being victimized by senior management, which is majoritarily male. And we heard these stories from powerful women playing powerful roles in their organizations, in society, coming down and saying, but I have this problem. So when I cross the threshold of my home, I'm experiencing a disempowerment. When I walk into my office, if it's in any particular organization, I'm experiencing these problems, and I decide to keep quiet because I'm not able to voice those opinions for fear of losing some ground that has taken a lot to establish. So for me, that's the big thing. How do you reconfigure and decide? You can't stop being a mother, you can't stop being a wife when you cross the threshold of the corporate sphere, but it's about a reorganization of attitude, personal attitude to yourself, re-establishing your self-worth in that instance, and not putting up with what is essentially violence in the workplace by not voicing your opinion.
We've heard a lot of statistics around the workplace, and in some ways it feels like women are just not making it. Do you feel that in the experience of the women that you've worked with, and you have worked a lot, I think you're working with a rural women's development program. Do you think that women in some ways are themselves to blame for not putting themselves forward? Or are they afraid of this violence that you're referring to?
The fear is internalized. It does come back from our social upbringing or social way of connecting. And so it's really, like I said, about a renegotiating of that space, both the social space, the corporate space, a governmental, organizational space that you're working in, and a reorganization of attitude towards women and of women, personal reorganization of attitude. It's not so much of how you're seen. Your need to present yourself is quite important, but it's not so much of how you're seen as how you see yourself. That belief in self is essential to changing the dynamic of how you exist in particular spaces.
A lot of women see themselves in a very lonely place. It can be very lonely. So if you have your space in the corporate world, it's wonderful. In academia, it's wonderful. But if you are a woman, and we're going to be talking to a woman who's got her own business in a minute, it can be a very lonely place. And what's been wonderful about this conference is that there's been so much communication. You yourself came along as a social media reporter. You were busy tweeting away to all and sundry. Do you think that there's a lot to be gained from this level of communication?
Once again, it's about unlearning and relearning. And the communication, we have access to all sorts of platforms, both in the media, social media, and spaces such as we lead as this conference. So how do we re-engage those spaces, and how do we encourage each other, both as women and as men, to engender communication in a better way, both between us and across the board?
Many questions, not always so many answers. Shafina Hassin, thank you so much for joining us, and very best of luck. I've no doubt we'll talk again. I've no doubt that you'll probably be bringing out another book very, very soon, so we'll be sure to speak again. Thanks.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot. You're listening to Otherwise here on SAFM, and we're coming to you from the 7th Annual Women's Leadership Conference, where there's been a lot of communication, there's been a lot of consolidation, there's been a lot of conflict, there's been a lot of diversity. In actual fact, right with me now I have Tsidi Malapo. She's a senior manager, Group International Internal Audit at Anglo Gold Ashanti. And at one point she put up her hand and she said, "I am sick and tired." Well, Tsidi, lovely to have you with us. Tell us about what it was that you are sick and tired.
Nancy, there were 5 points put up on the notice board about the key weaknesses that women display in the workplace. So women who've worked hard, risen up in the corporate ladder, But here are the key weaknesses. We show emotion. One of the points was we are not confident. We every so often will cry, and all big no-nos. So of course, as a young woman growing up in South Africa, you're furiously taking down notes, intending to overcome those weaknesses. Now, what I have experienced in my career is that as I've perfected, honing in and overcoming those weaknesses, I have transformed into a man. Or so I'm perceived to be. That I now resemble a man, and more and more I am failing to show those female features that make me who I am. So my point was just saying, we need to redefine ourselves. We need to put up the 5 key things that define us as women in the workplace, define us as women rising up the corporate ladder. They will not be in any shape, form, or size resembling the male key 5 points.
Yeah. It's quite clear that you haven't transformed into a man, I have to say that just by looking at you. But one of the criticisms that's been levelled against you, seeing as you've overcome these weaknesses, is that you've been referred to as the lady with the iron balls. And so it seems like it's a bit of a no-win situation.
Absolutely.
How have people actively said that to you? Gosh, Stevie, suddenly you so male. Has it been seen as a criticism?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. It's very quickly when you ask for it, you want the woman to be confident, to be abrupt, to be to maintain eye contact, and really very much display those qualities that you see in powerful men today. Well, she's suddenly starting to look very much like a John instead of a Jane. Because she is confident, speaking abruptly, and maintaining eye contact, and so on. Whereas women are seen more softer, demure even, and we are the emotional, caring types. So we are not doing enough of the emotional stuff, but doing too much potentially of the confidence, the solid, steely eye contact, and so on and so forth.
Yes, you talk about being a John, not a Jill. There was somebody gave a little story about there was a definition of a boss, and that the boss was called Howard, and everybody listened to this sort of narrative about Howard, and then the same narrative was said again, but Howard was supplanted for Heidi, and everybody was very positive about Howard the boss. When it came to Heidi the boss, they didn't like her so much. They felt that she was just too, what was the word? Not too pushy, but too full of herself, I think it was. Those things that are seen as weaknesses, being too emotional, not being confident enough, crying, lack of eye contact, asking too many questions, talking too much. Did you take that list and think, right, I'm going to work through these? Was it an active, conscious decision?
It was very much an active, conscious decision, because the development of my career has been in male-dominated environments. So where you've identified the one sympathetic ear, they've pointed out that, the one thing you don't do in a boardroom is show any sort of weakness, and weakness is displayed in tears. So as soon as you feel the tears, rather leave the room rather than showing tears. So all along, throughout one's development, you have really been instilled with this impression that each one of these 5 points are the big no-nos. So if you are ambitious in any shape, form, or size, you will make sure that you overcome those weaknesses, so that you can now start displaying those qualities that are seen to be success of a successful leader. And in all of that, and fair enough, the people who were providing this advice were men, because it's a male-dominated environment.
Let's turn to something a little bit more positive, because those were the things that made you sick and tired. But what have you heard? And obviously you're somebody who has given a lot of thought to the issue of women's leadership, women's role in business. What have you heard that has made you think, that's something different?
One of the key things that is coming out, potentially not verbalized as strongly, is that women need to find their own answers. That we need to decide what is it that we want to see in ourselves. We need to take a little bit more responsibility in terms of how we want to see the future for ourselves, and certainly for our girl children. One key point that was raised by one of the speakers was the fact that this issue of sticky feet, that although there may be glass ceilings in the corporate environment, oftentimes it's the sticky feet that are the constraint. So you never even get to look up and see a glass ceiling because you're too busy looking down and looking at the things that really are part of your own constraint, the internal constraint that is in us. So introspection among women, particularly women of South Africa, and taking our place. A key takeaway for me was, for example, take your place at the table. Own it. Never leave until you're ready to leave. Don't let circumstances define what your objectives are and what your goals are. And strive and reach out and grab that opportunity and own it for yourself, but define it in the way that it doesn't compromise you, hence remaining authentic to self. And not feeling like you have to become male in your characteristics.
So that it doesn't compromise your femininity. So
Absolutely.
Despite having been called the lady with the iron balls, do you maintain a femininity?
Well,
Actively?
I think I've had enough time to think through this topic in trying to say, well, how can I remain feminine with my tears and my emotive side in a male-dominated industry like mining? Can the miners handle the tears? And I'm saying, well, it's not a can. I'm saying they will just have to, because that's me. But I am providing a different perspective. I am a value. I provide a very new, very different, very much needed value proposition to the mining industry that they frankly cannot do without. And that is the confidence that one needs to bring to the table. And very quickly, I think the men will start marching to our tune instead of us to theirs.
Well, that's confident. How is that for confident speech? Sidi Molapo, thank you so much for joining us, and you just go back on in there and give it to them. It's lovely to hear you. Thank you so
Nancy,
much.
it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Sidi is Senior Management Group Internal Audit at Anglo Gold Ashanti, telling us exactly what she thinks. Well, there you go. You're listening to Otherwise here on SAFM, and we're talking at the 7th Annual Women's Leadership Conference. And interesting about this is that we could actually be talking to each and every one of the delegates here, because everyone has a story. But we've kept the best for the last, because we're very, very thrilled. Because we have with us right now, we have one of the SAFM listeners who won herself a place here. She's Lebohang Dita, and she calls herself a stay-at-home mum with her own business. So we're really looking forward to hearing about that. Lebohang, how wonderful that you're here. Is it everything that you felt it would be so far, so good? How's it going?
Thank you, Nancy, for inviting me. Absolutely.
Well, I didn't invite you. I'm just. The kudos goes to the Quality Life people.
You know what I mean. Thank you for the opportunity. Absolutely. It's been quite an enjoyable morning. Just from a networking point of view, as I said, I'm a stay-at-home mum who also runs her own business, which can be very lonely. So it's been good to come out, meet a diverse, some people I know in the room, so reconnect with them, but also just meet a diversity of people. And the speakers as well have been quite good. There's already stuff to take away, and it's only halfway through day one,
isn't it?
And that's very good.
I'm interested in how you refer to yourself as a stay-at-home mum. In fact, it's usually qualified with, I'm just a stay-at-home mum. I read the other day that somebody said, can we just drop this line of working mothers, because every mother is a working mother, and just a stay-at-home mum. You're not just staying at home, you have your own business. Just tell us about your business and how it started and when it started.
I was actually listening to you when you spoke about dropping this working mum, and I think it's a brilliant idea. My company is called Azara Capital. It's a small company that I founded when I left corporate life. We have investments in other companies, mainly in mining and in logistics. But I think largely the decision to leave corporate was to spend more time with my children. So I start with the stay-at-home mum first, because that is what I do most of the time. There is the business, but the children come first, and I've had to make that distinction, obviously. And I must say, stay-at-home mum is also more profitable than the business. And I'm not just talking money. I'm getting dividends that really warm my heart, which I'm enjoying.
So you're a stay-at-home business mum?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, stay-at-home businesswoman. Never mind about the definitions. How old are your children now, and at what point did you decide to leave corporate life, and what point in their lives and in yours?
My two daughters are 16 and 9 years old. when my 16-year-old was 9 months old, I quit my job out of sheer frustration from getting calls from the crèche that she was sick and I must drop what I'm doing and come and fetch her, etc. I think I regained my sanity a year later, went back into the corporate environment and did the whole corporate mum thing of her staying late at aftercare and fetching her late and bringing her into the office and taking a 2-hour lunch for the violin lesson on some days, making sure there were no meetings on the day that it was a violin lesson because the teacher didn't understand that you were also working. And I've done that. And to some extent, I quite enjoyed my corporate life. But there came a time when my little one, Tumi, was about, 4 or 5 years old, kind of starting school, where I decided I think I need to do better than I did for Zoleka, who's 16. And so I think that's kind of when the decision came that I really needed to spend more time with them or just be able to be present. I must be honest, it's not active parenting 24/7, but I like the fact that I can go to the netball match and I don't have to juggle anything in order to do that. I like the fact that we can have a conversation every afternoon on the drive from school to horse riding. Or, I enjoy that. And for me, that's almost priceless for now. I may make other decisions later, but for now, I'm enjoying this decision.
Yeah,
it's working.
It sounds like it's a successful strategy. I want to find out exactly how it works in just a minute. You're listening to Otherwise on SAFM, South Africa's news and information. It's Otherwise, and we're coming to you from the 7th Annual Women's Leadership Conference. Stay tuned.
Otherwise on SAFM.
Otherwise it is, and what we really like best of all is talking to our listeners, and we have a listener here, and Lebogang Dita. She's a stay-at-home working businesswoman, mother, and she's here because she won herself a ticket to the Women's Leadership Conference, which is a wonderful thing, and she's been telling us about her business and how it works. And she's got 2 daughters, interestingly enough, Lebogang, that you would be role modeling for your daughters, but how does it work? You describe that it can be a little bit lonely. You off to netball matches and all sorts of lessons and things. Is it successful? Is your business working well?
Nancy, I think that it is, and largely because it is a relatively small business. It's an investment company, so I'm not actively involved in the companies that I'm invested in. I'm simply a shareholder, and luckily, one of them, incidentally, we're funded by IDC, which is a pleasure to be here, hosted by them. Thank you. Yes, and as I said, they're largely small, not small investments, but because one is a shareholder and not actively involved in terms of hours required, it does allow one the flexibility to then spend more time on, my afternoons with my daughters, essentially.
Can I just ask you one thing? Do you have a life strategy? I mean, after what you've heard today, I imagine if you haven't, you probably will, but is it something you've sat down and strategized how you're going to work?
Nancy, it's constantly changing, unfortunately. So it's not written out and one follows
dynamic
kind
strategy.
of it's absolutely dynamic. What I'm doing in terms of what I'm doing in terms of investments now, it's different to what I thought I'd be doing when I left the bank. Also in terms of parenting, I've had to juggle things around as well, because suddenly you are available and then you realize, well, the children are leaving their sports kits at home because they know mom can bring them, and then you've had to say, hey, no, that's not what I'm here for. And so my parenting as well has had to change and adjust to them. And I suppose also because they're at different times of their lives, so they require different things from me. But my strategy is changing, and I also constantly speak to other women who've kind of been at my place. I recently spoke to a woman who was saying, well, she regretted giving up work. She now, rather, regrets giving up work because the children have grown up and have left home, etc. They have their own lives. So I'm quite conscious that when my 9-year-old is kind of 16, I will be doing very different things to what I'm doing now. So I know
I love it that it's flexible, and it sounds like you wouldn't have it any other way, and we're absolutely thrilled to have you here, and do stay tuned and lovely enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you, Nancy.
Lebogang Dita, and she will be here for the rest of the conference. Thanks very much to the team. Siki Ngabadeli has just arrived, so it's all action here at the conference. Thanks so much to the team for getting it all together. I'm Nancy Richards. Together I'm Nancy Richards.